right, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling migrant worker programs.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, especially comparing how the U.S., Taiwan, and Japan do things.
Sounds complex.
Oh, it is. One listener even wrote in asking, where does the future of migrant work lie? Well, big question, right?
Definitely big, especially with how globalized everything's getting. Looking at those three countries, though, it's like a sneak peek into how things could go worldwide.
Okay, so before we get country-specific,
Yeah.
what's even driving countries to rely so much on migrant workers?
Several factors, actually. Aging populations are huge, like in developed countries.
Makes sense fewer young folks to work.
Exactly, especially jobs that are, well, tough on the body.
Just thinking about construction makes my back ache.
Right. Then some industries just always need workers, more than they can find locally.
And of course, wages play a role.
Huge role. People will move where the money's better. It's natural.
So aging populations, constant industry need, and that desire for a better life, it's powerful stuff.
It really is, and each country mixes those ingredients differently. The U.S., for example, has this long, tangled history with immigration. Economy is kind of built on it.
I was surprised how MUCH, they rely on migrant workers. It's not always obvious.
It's become so every day. Think agriculture, construction, service industry, migrant labor's everywhere.
But it's more than just filling jobs, right? There's the cultural side, too.
Oh, massive cultural impact. U.S. diversity, the food, music, art. So much is shaped by immigrants, migrant workers included.
For sure. But then there's the opposite side. People worried about job competition, wages being pushed down.
That's only a concern. God acknowledge that. It's multifaceted.
Absolutely. And undocumented workers, that's a whole other layer.
Absolutely. When folks are forced outside the legal system, they're so vulnerable to exploitation. Ethically, it's a huge worry.
Okay, so U.S. is complicated. What about Taiwan? Migrant workers a lot too, right?
You're right, hundreds of thousands, mainly in manufacturing and caregiving.
Which is probably why you can get amazing Indonesian food everywhere in Taiwan these days. It's about her Indonesian caregiver, and the food scene's totally changed.
That's migration's ripple effect. Fascinating to see it shaping Taiwan. And their government's trying to improve worker protections, which is good.
That's great to hear. But even with that, I bet there's still challenges. Undocumented workers, making sure everyone's treated fairly.
You nailed it. Undocumented workers are a big issue. They're causing problems from exploitation to social instability. It's a tightrope for the government.
Okay, so U.S., Taiwan, onto Japan, which seems totally different. They're dealing with a rapidly aging population, right?
One of the oldest in the world. It's forcing a change in how they view migrant workers.
Like a total rethink.
Totally. More long-term visas, even paths to citizenship are being talked about, especially for elder care.
Wow, so they're having to adapt, just like welcoming someone new into the family to help with grandma and grandma.
Great analogy, but they've got unique challenges. Japan's culture is so distinct, language barriers are tough. There's concern about fair treatment, integration.
I've heard Japanese society can be pretty homogenous, so yeah, navigating that must be tricky.
It can be. Slow progress. But there are signs of change.
Okay, so three very different countries, each handling migrant workers their own way. This whole issue is mind-blowing.
It really is.
But before we go deeper, something I found fascinating while researching. Those videos about the communities migrant workers create, remember?
Oh, yeah. The ones at Taipei Main Station, Taoyuan, so lively.
Exactly, like a whole world within the city. But then there's the other side, like that story about the Indonesian caregiver with only one day off per month. Makes you think about the sacrifices.
It does, and that brings up the big question. Ethically, how do we handle migrant worker programs globally?
That's huge. Where do we even start?
Balance, I think. Policies have to acknowledge the economic good and the potential impact on society. Fair wages, safety, paths to fitting in, it's all key.
So it's not just money, it's about human rights, basic decency.
Exactly. And that leads us to an even bigger question. What future do we want for these workers? What role can each country play in making that happen?
Whoa, those are deep. Not sure I have the answers.
Me neither. But we need to be thinking about them. The world's more connected than ever, so solutions need countries working together, learning from each other.
It's easy to get overwhelmed by the problems, but I also feel hopeful, you know? Like in that optimism bias video, maybe focusing on the good that migration can do is how things change for the better.
I love that. It's so easy to dwell on the negative, but solutions, possibilities. That's what matters.
Totally. Imagine migrant workers valued, treated fairly, contributing their skills, and enriching our societies. That's the future I'm on board with.
Me too. And it's one we can all help build.
Okay, deep divers, that was a lot. But these conversations are so important to understanding how complex migration is. What struck you? What are your thoughts?
The tension between what countries need economically and how we treat people ethically, it's tough.
For sure. And it's everywhere. But hey, maybe that's what makes these deep dives so crucial. More we learn, better we understand, better chance we have at a better future.
Absolutely. Learning and understanding are the first steps.
Okay, before we get too philosophical, let's recharge for a bit.
Good idea.
We'll be back soon to keep digging into this fascinating topic.
Can't wait.
I just want to give another shout out to Micky from Mickytolife. His channel is a treasure trove of inspiration, and he's a huge Sip&Talk fan.
Absolutely. Make sure to check him out and maybe even share your awesome podcast intro with him once you've created it. Welcome back, everyone. Ready to keep exploring this migrant worker situation?
Oh, absolutely. After that last part, I'm really thinking about that balance we need between, the economy needing workers, but treating those workers decently.
Right. It's like this constant push and pull between what's good for business versus what's just plain right.
Totally. So how are these countries actually doing that balancing act? It seems like they've each got their own rules and problems.
They do. The U.S., for example, had immigration forever, but their system, it's known for being bureaucratic. Kind of a mess.
No kidding. Trying to figure out U.S. immigration policies like, I don't know, solving a Rubik's Cube in the dark.
Haha. I can see that.
Yeah.
They've got these visas, H-2A and H-2B for temporary workers, but even those have limits.
Hold on. Back up a sec. What are those for exactly? Who can even get them?
So H-2A is specifically for farm work, agriculture. H-2B is for other seasonal jobs, but not farm stuff. Employers got to prove they can't find Americans to do the work, and there's only so many visas each year.
I see. But I'm guessing it's not just apply, get visa, start work, right?
Nope, can be really complicated and costly, both for the employer and the worker. And even if everything's done right, there's still that risk of exploitation. We've seen cases where workers get charged these crazy fees just to be recruited, or their bosses don't even pay them what they earned.
Ugh, that's horrible. And then you've got undocumented workers on top of that, which just makes it even more confusing.
Exactly. Millions of undocumented workers in the U.S., by some estimates. They're even more likely to be taken advantage of because, well, they're not legally there.
Okay, so the U.S. is... Yeah, complicated is putting it mildly. What about Taiwan? They seemed a bit more on top of protecting worker rights, from what we read.
They are. Taiwan's approach is interesting. They know they need migrant workers, and they've made some pretty good labor laws because of it.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Sure. They have a minimum wage specifically for migrant workers, which is a good start. Rules about how many hours you can work, overtime pay, even access to health care. They've even been testing out ways for some workers to, stay permanently.
Wow, that's pretty forward-thinking. So they're like the best example then?
Not quite. Still problems. Big one is those protections often don't cover undocumented workers.
Right. If you're not officially recognized, it's way harder to make sure you're treated right.
Exactly. And Taiwan's got a growing number of undocumented workers, too, which causes a lot of the same issues as in the U.S.
Got it. So Taiwan's moving in the right direction, but there's room to improve. What about Japan? How do they fit into all this?
Japan's really fascinating. Historically, they've been super resistant to immigration, large scale. But now, with their population getting older so fast, they're having to rethink things.
Yeah, it's like they're being forced into it, whether they like it or not.
Pretty much. And it's leading to some big changes. More visa programs, especially for things like elder care, and even creating ways for skilled workers to stay for good.
That's a huge shift for a country that's always been about keeping their culture so, pure.
It is. Shows they're facing reality. Some people in Japan are worried about what immigration will do to their culture, their identity. And there's always the worry about whether migrant workers are getting a fair shake, the same opportunities as people born in Japan.
That makes sense. Tough to juggle those worries with, the fact that they just need more workers.
It is a real balancing act.
Okay, so we've got 3 countries, 3 different ways of doing things, and it's all complex.
Mm-hmm.
As we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive, what's sticking out to you?
For me, it's that no matter where you look, countries are wrestling with the same problem. How do you balance the economy needing people with treating those people ethically? There's no easy answer.
Totally. It's like trying to find that perfect spot on a seesaw where both sides are happy.
Exactly. And that spot keeps moving.
Right. It's always changing. But hey, maybe that's what makes this so interesting, right? There's always more to learn, more to figure out.
Absolutely. And that's what makes these deep dives so engaging. We're not just looking for answers, we're exploring how complicated this whole global issue is.
I agree. And maybe that's how we find better solutions, by exploring those complexities. So, deep divers, stay tuned, because in our last segment, we're going to shift gears a bit. We'll be looking at some potential solutions, some glimmers of hope on the horizon.
It's not all doom and gloom.
Definitely not. See you soon. Okay, deep divers, we're back, ready to wrap up this whole migrant worker program deep dive.
And hopefully leave you feeling a bit more optimistic about the future, right?
Exactly. Because after all that talk about challenges and how messy it is, I'm ready for some good news.
Well, the good news is just us having this conversation is a good sign. People worldwide are more aware of migrant workers and their rights.
That's true. It's becoming less about just the economics and more about basic human decency.
Exactly. And that awareness is starting to turn into actual changes in policy, in how governments are handling things.
Ooh, okay, tell me more. What kind of changes are we seeing?
Well, we mentioned Taiwan, right? They've been putting in stronger protections for workers, minimum wage, rules about work hours, making sure they can get health care.
Right. That's a big deal. Shows they're serious about making things fairer.
They are. And it's not just them. Japan, even though they've been hesitant about immigration, they're stepping up too.
Really? How so?
More visa options, making it easier for some workers to stay permanently, even funding language and cultural training.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Especially for a country that's always been so, focused on their own traditions.
It is. Shows they're adapting, realizing how valuable these workers are, especially with their population aging so fast.
So some good stuff happening at the top level with governments. But what about, on the ground, where migrant workers are actually living, working? What's happening there?
A lot of inspiring stuff, actually. We're seeing more and more grassroots groups, people organizing to support migrant workers, connecting them to resources, advocating for their rights.
I love that. People power.
It is. And it's not just fighting for better conditions. There's also more emphasis on cultural exchange, helping people integrate, community events, language classes, even cooking workshops so people can share their food, their traditions.
That's awesome. It's about breaking down those barriers, building understanding.
Exactly. And that can lead to a more inclusive society, which is better for everyone in the long run.
So thinking about our listeners, what can they do to be part of this positive change?
Lots of things. Supporting organizations that are fighting for worker rights is huge. Volunteer, donate, just spread the word about what's going on.
Even just talking to friends and family about these issues helps, right?
Absolutely. And on a more personal level, we can all try to check our own biases, get to know your neighbors, support businesses run by migrants, just be an ally in your community.
It's those small actions that add up, right? Can create a real wave of change.
Totally. And that's what gives me hope, seeing people come together to make the world a bit more just.
Okay, deep divers, as we finish up this exploration of migrant worker programs, I want you to walk away with this. The future isn't set in stone. What we do, the choices we make, how much we commit to treating everyone with respect, that's what shapes the future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. No matter where you are, you can make a difference.
And speaking of exploring the world, got to give a shout out to a YouTube channel I love. Mickytolife. They do these awesome travel and food vlogs, really capture the beauty and diversity of different cultures.
Sounds like a great way to expand our horizon.
It is. So keep exploring, stay curious, and keep diving deep into the world around you. Thanks for joining us, deep divers. We'll catch you on the next dive.
See ya.